everyone, welcome to our next lesson. Today we're going to do what I'm calling branch weaving. And I think most of you remember, except my kinders, that last year we did an enormous weaving. It's in the library right now. And everybody took part in that, so I feel like everybody might be able to do this. It might be more challenging for my young ones, but I'll give some adjustments and hopefully everybody can get through it. So when we weave, there's a couple of things we need, right? We need a loom. We need the material to weave. In this case, I'm going to be using yarn, but I'll give you some alternatives. And I'm going to say today we need some scissors to cut our yarn. So our basic materials for today's lesson will be a branch that you go out and find, and finding the branch might be the a fun part to do. It's important that the branch have a Y in it, okay? And it doesn't have to be really huge. It can be really big, like this one here, where you could do multiple weavings, or it can be kind of a medium size here, or it could even be smaller than this one. The most important thing is that this Y part is strong. We don't want it to be so tiny and that the branches are so thin that it snaps really easy. So this part should be fairly strong. All right, so a Y branch. And you need some sort of weaving material. I'm going to be using these yarns, all right? I have a lot of yarn, and scissors, right? 1, 2, 3 things at the very least. So I will show you the materials that I have that you might have around the house if you don't have yarn. So here's paracord, right? It's the cord a lot of people make those kind of bracelets, those survival bracelets with, paracord. There's sisal, which is kind of this, a lot of times this is like just used around the house for things. Sisal. Something called jute, which is kind of like sisal. It's an organic natural fiber, and we use it sometimes for wrapping presents or just as a common household material. Or more ribbons that we use for wrapping. We could use ribbon to weave, all right? So that's a good one. Also, many people might have some friendship bracelet yarn. You could use that. And I have some other, this is just regular nylon string that you might have hanging around the house. I even did one with paper because I thought, well, how would paper weave? If you didn't have any string or any kind of material, could you cut paper into strips and weave? So I did this little sample. It's challenging. I wouldn't recommend it. It's an absolute last resort for people who don't have any kind of string or yarn hanging around the house, and really only probably for my older students because it's a little takes a lot of precision and kind of care to make it work out. So that's your absolute necessities, materials. Put mine over here. Next, we're going to get to how we make the loom. When we're making the loom, we want to keep certain ideas in mind. We're going to have a string that is strung horizontally across the loom. So here's my loom with my Y shape. We're going to string some yarn horizontally. That is called in weaving the weft yarn, W-E-F-T. And then we are going to use other yarn that we're going to weave in a vertical pattern, top to bottom, all right? And that's called the warp, okay? So we're weaving the warp, and we're gonna secure a weft horizontal yarn first before we start weaving. So what I want you to do is decide whatever yarn you picked, and you might want to have 2 to 3 colors, 2 at the very minimum, but 3 would be nice, or you could have a lot of different colors depending on what your materials are and what you have around the house. I'm going to use my orange yarn to create my loom, all right? And one of the things I like about using the branch loom is that it's kind of a all-in-one loom. You don't need to build it, right? It just exists in nature, and the final product, it's kind of part of the art piece, right? It's beautiful. So you can hang it on a wall just with the branch, and it becomes part of the art piece, and I like that. So I did it with this one here using the same colors. This is really old because it's been sitting out in the sun, but it's beautiful just to hang on a wall and have the branch be part of the artwork. So my yarn, I'm going to use the orange yarn to make my weft part of the loom. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to start by just cutting some yarn to begin with so that I don't have to work with this big clump of yarn, okay? So I'm going to take the yarn, I'm going to unravel some of it, and I'm going to measure it. Just unravel a few pieces. I'm going to measure it. If I don't have a tape measure or a ruler, this is a really easy way to do it. I grab the end of the yarn in my left hand and I stretch my arm all the way out till it stops. And then I pull my other hand just to the middle of my chest, right? And I'm going to do that 3 times. So here's 1, 2, 3, and I'll cut this. Then I'm going to turn my loom so it's facing me, so the V part is away from me. I'm going to roll up my yarn real quick so it has a little bit of a ball. And I'm going to take the loose end and I'm going to wrap it around one of the arms of the Y of the branch, right? I'm just going to tie a knot. One thing to be aware of when you start, especially for my younger students, it doesn't have to be super tight and polished looking. If you remember the piece we did last year, it was kind of all over the place, and it was, some of the stuff was woven in really loose, and that actually looks really beautiful too. So don't worry about it having to be really perfect and tight, right? Okay, so I've tied this around and I've made a knot out of it. Now, for my young students, I'm going to start with you first. We're going to be going in a figure 8. So we're going to be going down, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, all the way back and forth on these 2 Y branches. All right. And for my younger kids, I'm going to have the older kids wrap it twice, but I don't think I need to do that for the younger kids. So let me put this up on me so you can see a little easier. I'm starting at the V of the Y and I'm working toward myself. Okay. So I've tied one end on. I'm just going to go over or under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And I might have like a couple of fingers width in between each one of them, or I can make it a lot, I can scoot it closer to each other too. If I want, for my younger kids, it's completely okay to have it more spread out. Over, under, and just make sure that you're kind of keeping the yarn a little tight so you don't get a lot of slack. Over, under. When you get to the point where you think you have enough on there, then you can wrap it around a couple times. Right? And swirl it around, and you're going to tie it off again with another knot. Right? I'm just going to do it. So that is a really loose, simple loom for my younger students. All right, guys, let's begin our first weaving. So this is the first loom that we created the weft pattern on. This is going to be for my younger art students, K1 and 2 grades, possibly. My older grades, if you like this way, if it's easier to put on the weft yarn instead of doing the double wrap, be my guest. Whatever's easiest and is going to make it fun. So notice that I have my 3 colors set out, and I've pre-measured and cut them to begin with. And I just want to show you how I did that for both my older students and my younger students. This is not a very big loom, so I don't need a ton of yarn, especially for my younger students. So just as we did in the very beginning when we measured out the yarn for the loom, I pull whatever color I want to use. I want to use one pull of the yarn. Remember I said I pinch one end of the yarn with my index finger and my thumb, and I pull my arm all the way out to the side until it ends, and then I bring my other hand and finger to the middle of my chest, and then that's where I cut, right? So for this kinder first and second grade loom, or possibly older student loom, we only need one of those arm stretches per color. So I have 1, 2, 3, and I wanted to show different materials for the two different looms. So I picked ribbon, jute, and some yarn for like friendship bracelet yarn for this younger piece. So the first thing we're going to do is take our first color, we're going to tie it onto one of the ends, and I just needed regular old single knot. Should be tight, but it doesn't have to be a double knot. So I'm going to take my first color and I'm just going to tie a knot on it. So I attached it to one side. I'm going to go over my first yarn and I'm going to come back underneath my second yarn, right? And I'm going to keep doing that for every single orange yarn on the loom, right? So I've gone over the first two. My third one, I've got to go over it, and then I'm going to come under my fourth yarn, and I'm going to go over my fifth yarn and come under my sixth yarn. And I like the way it hooks on this thing. I kind of like the way it does that, so I'm going to let it do that. It kind of makes it look a little bit more abstract. It's not pure weaving, but I kind of like that look, because this loom and this piece for the younger kids, it's going to come out very loose and abstract looking, and they might only pass through a couple of times with your different colors. So guys, when you're doing this, my students, if you go back and forth maybe 2-3 times, that's enough. Then you can start with your next color. All right, so my very last yarn, I went over it, right? So I want to reverse that going back. I want to go under it going back, because I want to give that little yarn a little hug, right? I want this yarn to wrap around that. Just think of the pattern over, under, over, under, over, under. It just keeps doing that, over, under. Even when you switch directions, you just keep saying that, over, under, over, under. So I went under my last one, so I'm going to go over it this time. Under, over, under, over, under, over, pull it through, right? Then I'm going to keep going. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And I'm going to pull it through. See how loose it is? And I can push them kind of close to each other a little bit. And then I'm going to go back again. And I finished here by going under this one, so which way do I want to go? If I went under it last, I want to go over it next. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And maybe I'm done. Maybe I've gone 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm done. So I think what I want to do is just tie it off and start my next color. So just like I did when I tied on, I'm just going to tie a little knot around it. It only has to be a single knot. That's good enough. Tie it tight, and we're done. All right, now I'm going to pick my second color, which is the jute yarn. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start on the right hand side. I'm going to tie my jute, just a single knot, onto the orange yarn on one side, and then I'm going to start by going over, under, over, under, over, under. And what's nice about this loom is these are spaced so far apart that it gives you lots of room to see the pattern of having to go over and under, right? So I went over this one last, so I've got to go under it, over, under, over, under, over, under. And then let's go back again. Over, under, over, under, over, under. And maybe now I think I want to trade colors. I've gone 1, 2, 3 times. So what do I have to do? I have to tie it off, right? Just a single knot will do. Practice your knots. This gives you lots of good practice tying knots and doing like that sewing kind of pattern. Last color. I'm going to put it on the bottom, I think, this time. I'm going to go to the other side of my orange, and I'm going to tie this one on. And I'm going to do it again. What do we do? Over, under, over, under. So I'm going to go over the first one, under the second one, over the third one, under the fourth one, over the fifth, under the sixth, over the seventh. And then come back. Under the seventh, over the sixth, under the fifth yarn, over the fourth yarn, under the third yarn, over the second yarn, under the first yarn. If I went under last, what am I going to do next? Over it. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over. Now, how many times have I gone? 1, 2, 3. I think maybe I'll go one more time. So I went over last, so I've got to go under this time. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Pull it all the way through so it hugs that last orange yarn. Has to hug it, go around the corner, and I'm going to tie it off just like I did when I tied it on. Once I'm done there, I'm done. Now, it's going to look something like this. Now, I like these little tails hanging, so I would keep them on. But if you wanted to, you could take your scissors and you could snip off the tail ends. That would be the last thing you could do. But you can notice it's very light and loose, and it just gives you a little chance to practice that over, under, that kind of sewing in and out, over, under kind of technique. And I think it looks really beautiful. When we're making the loom, we want to keep certain ideas in mind. We're going to have a string that is strung horizontally across the loom. So here's my loom with my Y shape. We're going to string some yarn horizontally. That is called in weaving the weft yarn, W-E-F-T. And then we are going to use other yarn that we're going to weave in a vertical pattern, top to bottom, all right? And that's called the warp, okay? So we're weaving the warp, and we're gonna secure a weft horizontal yarn first before we start weaving. So what I want you to do is decide whatever yarn you picked, and you might want to have 2 to 3 colors, 2 at the very minimum, but 3 would be nice, or you could have a lot of different colors depending on what your materials are and what you have around the house. I'm going to use my orange yarn to create my loom, all right? And one of the things I like about using the branch loom is that it's kind of an all-in-one loom. You don't need to build it, right? It just exists in nature, and the final product, it's kind of part of the art piece, right? It's beautiful. So you can hang it on a wall just with the branch, and it becomes part of the art piece, and I like that. So I did it with this one here using the same colors. This is really old because it's been sitting out in the sun, but it's beautiful just to hang on a wall and have the branch be part of the artwork. So my yarn, I'm going to use the orange yarn to make my weft part of the loom. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to start by just cutting some yarn to begin with so that I don't have to work with this big clump of yarn, okay? So I'm going to take the yarn, I'm going to unravel some of it, and I'm going to measure it. Just unravel a few pieces. I'm going to measure it. If I don't have a tape measure or a ruler, this is a really easy way to do it. I grab the end of the yarn in my left hand, and I stretch my arm all the way out till it stops. And then I pull my other hand just to the middle of my chest, right? And I'm going to do that 3 times. So here's 1, 2, 3, and I'll cut this. Then I'm going to turn my loom so it's facing me, so the V part is away from me. I'm going to roll up my yarn real quick so it has a little bit of a ball. And I'm going to take the loose end and I'm going to wrap it around one of the arms of the Y of the branch, right? I'm just going to tie a knot. For my older students, we're going to wrap the loom, the weft yarn, a little differently. We're still doing that circle 8, that figure 8, or that infinity sign, but we're just going to do it in a little different fashion. And when I say older students, I mean 3rd, 4th, 5th. And this style of wrapping that I'm going to show you is going to allow you to get a little tighter weave should you want to weave it a little tighter, okay? That takes a little bit more patience and skill, so I thought I would give you a chance to have a little better constructed loom than the younger students. Okay, so what I did is here's the V of the branch. I'm working from the where the V begins down there, and I'm working toward me, right, coming up to the end of the branches. The first thing I did was I cut my yarn just like I showed the younger students. It's about 3 yards of yarn, and I tied one end on to one of the sides of the V. Once I tie it on, I'm going to do just like I did with the Kinder, so I'm going to go under, and this time instead of just doing over once, I'm going to do over twice. Ready? So I'm going to go over once and over twice, right? And then I'm going to take it under the other side. And I want to make sure that I'm kind of keeping my tension pretty good so that these strings don't get too soft. And then I'm going to go over once. My branch wants to kind of tilt, that's why I'm going slow. I'm going to go over twice, and then I'm going to come back under the second branch, right? And I can push these two together. And then I'm going to go over once. And then I'm going to go over twice. And then I'm going to go over the under the other branch. On and on and on and on until you get to the part where you want to stop, right? How big do you want your weaving to be? Do you want it to be this big? Do you want it to be all the way to the top? How big do you want it to be? I'm only going to go to this knob. One more time, go over again. And then when you're ready, just tie it off, just like you did the first one. I'm going to stick this underneath twice, once, twice. Through a bunch of times, tie a bunch of knots with it, okay? And then just leave the rest of that hang. It's okay for now. So now you have your loom, and yours is a little tighter and has a little more tension than my Kinder loom. Right, so here's our loom with our weft yarn in place, and I've pre-cut the 3 colors I want to use on my loom. All right, I did it just like I did in the beginning, showed you how I measured it out. You can have more of one color than the other if you want. If you want more of one color on your loom, you can do all one color. You can do many colors. You can do just a couple of colors, your choice. So I'm going to start with my blue yarn. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to start on one end of my loom. I'm going to start where I tied this orange string onto the loom. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to tie on my blue yarn. I only need to do probably just a regular old knot, double knot. 1. These thick yarns are really nice because they take up a lot of space and they fill up the loom really fast, but sometimes they can be a little cumbersome, hard to handle, but okay. So now I have it tied on. We're going over one, over the first one, under the second one, over the third one, under the fourth one, over the fifth one, under the sixth one, over the seventh, under the eighth, over the ninth, under the 10th. And then we're doing it and we're reversing it. So if I came under the 10th, then I'm going to go over the 10th, under the 9th, over the 8th, under the 7th, etc., etc. So let me show you what that looks like. So the first I'm going to do is go over the first one. Then I'm going to bring it back under the second one. Right? And then I'm going to go over the third one and under the fourth one, over the fifth and under the sixth, over the seventh, under the eighth. So you're just weaving in and out over the ninth and under the 10th, right? Now, if I went under the 10th, I want to make sure to start by going over the 10th next time. If I do it the other way, if I try to go under the 10th, I'm just going to be unraveling what I just did. All right, so now I've gotten one line woven, and I need to pull that up. Try to pull it up as close to the branch as you can, okay? And then I'm going to reverse that. And I'm going to go back and forth as many times as I want to go until I'm tired of using this color. This isn't a huge loom, so I don't have a lot of room to put all my colors in. If you were doing one of these bigger ones where you had a lot of room, you could put a large amount of colors on. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I chose this skinny loom. So here I go, I've pulled them all up, and I remember I want to go over the 10th. You know what I think I can do? I'm going to unravel this and see if it works. Unravel it and kind of use it like a needle and thread. So I'm going to go over the 10th, under the 9th, over 8, under 7, over 6, under 5, over 4, under 3, and I just want to be pulling it through a little bit. Right? And I have over 2, under 1 left. Then I pull it all nice and tight. And I do the same thing. I take my fingers and I just pull it in tight toward the branch. And then just repeat that. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right? So I wanted to go over 1, under 2, over 3, under 4, over 5, under 6, over 7, under 8, over 9, under 10. Pull it a little tight and tuck it in. And just keep doing that until you get tired of using this color yarn. Now, let's say I was tired of using this color yarn. I want to tie it off. Okay, so I'm going to snip a little bit of it. And I'm going to tie it onto that orange string, just like I did in the very beginning. I want to make sure that this string is kind of tight. So tie it off, single or double knot, right? And then just let that end hang for now. And then you can start with your next color. All right, I'm going to start with white. Same thing, I'm going to tie it on to one side, right? Let it hang there. I'm going to tuck it in tight toward the blue, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to be going over and under, right? So let me get the end of my white. And I think this time I'm going to reverse it. Since the first time I went over first, this time with the white, with the first time with the blue, I went over the orange. Now with my white, I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to go under the orange. So it's under 1, over 2, under 3, over 4, under 5, over 6, under 7, over 8, under 9, over 10. And then I'm going to pull it tight. Right? Pull it and push it. And just keep going back and forth like that, just like we did with the blue. Remember, you're just repeating the phrase over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. It always alternates. And you keep going. If you're done with the white, tie it off, add the next color, go back and forth until you're done. So let's meet back. I'm going to finish up a little bit more white, and then I'm going to get the orange, and we'll meet back when we're done, see how it looks.
Encantos falando nos santos, dizendo que é filha do Senhor do Bom Fim. Mas pra cima de mim, pode jogar seu quebranto que eu não vou. Pode invocar o seu santo que eu não vou. Pode esperar sentada baiana que eu não vou. Não vou porque não posso resistir à tentação. Se ela sambar, eu vou sofrer.
Okay, so we're done. And you'll notice I finished with the white, I added a couple more lines, and then I went ahead and finished the orange. The very last thing that we do is we just cut off the tails, right? The ends that we tied. We want to just cut those off. So we want to take our scissors and we'll just snip them. I think I have one over here. I already did the orange one, and I think I have a blue one that I started with. Here we go. So there's that. So we have both of our beautiful weavings done. This is my third, fourth, fifth graders. Might look something like this. They could be a little looser. You might notice it's a little looser than this. That's fine. Actually, when it was a little looser, I liked that the orange yarn kind of showed through. Or it might be super tight like this, all right? And then for my younger students who just did a couple of passes through, theirs is gonna be a little looser like this, but I think that looks really cool and kind of abstract and fun. Hope you had fun with the weaving. If you're lucky enough to find a huge branch like this, you can do a couple of looms on it and make a big, large installation. That would be really cool. All right, guys, have fun. See you next time. Bye.